You mean a bigger one? Like
yeah,
what?
like a big pointer.
I don't think we have anything
Like a wand.
a wand. I need a
Yeah.
magic wand. That's
Because this way
with fairy dust. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Okay, so we'll just kind of start with the top and work our way down. So this is the entire structure here. This is the aorta. Okay, the entire thing is the aorta. Okay. And the aorta has different regions that you are going to be expected to know. This first region here is the ascending aorta. Where it makes the U-turn here is the aortic arch. From here all the way down to here, this portion is the descending aorta. The descending aorta is separated into two regions. This first region that goes through the thoracic cavity is called the thoracic aorta. And once the thoracic aorta passes through the diaphragm, which is here, once the thoracic aorta passes through the diaphragm, it becomes the abdominal aorta because it's in the abdominal cavity. So, the aortic arch has three superior branches that are coming off of the aorta. The first one here is the brachiocephalic trunk. The brachiocephalic trunk. The second one is going to be the left common carotid artery. The left common carotid artery. The third one is the left subclavian artery. Now the left subclavian artery, you can see that it actually is going to loop around a little bit and it's going to go underneath the clavicle and continue this way. Now, so this is the brachiocephalic trunk. The brachiocephalic trunk is going to bifurcate or split, and it splits into two. One projection is going to be the right common carotid artery, which is going to go up to the head and neck area and split off into the internal and external carotid arteries. And you can see a small part of that here, really small portion. The other part, the other projection coming off of the brachiocephalic trunk is going to be the right subclavian artery, and you cannot see the right subclavian in this particular model, but it does exist. This is the left common carotid artery, and you can see that the number actually changes here. So this is going to become the internal carotid artery, and then the external carotid artery is actually going to branch off somewhere here and disappears somewhere deeper in this model. That internal carotid artery is also viewable right here on the inside of the mouth, on the inside of the oral cavity. So that is the internal carotid artery as well. A little sneaky place for them to put it. So, all right. So for the veins in the same area, this is going to be the superior vena cava, the superior vena cava. Now the right and left brachiocephalic veins both are going to come together to drain into that superior vena cava. And the superior vena cava drains into the right atrium of the heart. As we go a little bit further out, we see that there's another vein here. If you look very closely, you see the same vein on the other side, which is right here. You only see just the very stump of it, though, on the other side. So this is the internal jugular vein, the internal jugular vein. And its partner does exist on the other side. It's just difficult to see in this model. This is a very small portion here of the external jugular vein, the external jugular vein. So the internal jugular vein is going to empty into, it actually is going to join with the subclavian vein to become the brachiocephalic vein. So it actually joins with the subclavian to become the brachiocephalic. Okay. So the external jugular vein is going to drain into the subclavian vein. The vertebral veins and the vertebral arteries are not viewable in this model. They're actually deeper in the body. That's one of the reasons why you usually don't see it in this model. All right. So now as we continue to go down the aorta, as we cross the diaphragm, this now becomes the abdominal aorta. The first structure that you see here that you're responsible for is this little notch here. Now this is the superior mesenteric artery, the superior mesenteric artery. The superior mesenteric artery is going to give oxygenated blood to the small intestines. Gives oxygenated blood to the small intestines. Right here. As we go down a little bit further, you'll see there's another notch here. This is the inferior mesenteric artery. And the inferior mesenteric artery is going to be going to give oxygenated blood to the colon or the large intestine. Now we also have our kidneys here. So these are our kidneys. And we have arteries and veins which go to and from the kidneys. And these are the renal arteries and renal veins. Okay, so these are in red, we've got the renal arteries. Blue, we have the renal veins. In this long thing in blue here, this is actually the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava. All right, so let's just look real quickly at the pathway to and from the kidneys, because that's a nice simple one. So let's do the arterial pathway to the kidneys. This would be oxygenated blood coming from the heart to the ascending aorta, through the aortic arch, through the thoracic aorta, through the abdominal aorta, through the renal arteries, and into the kidneys. Now, deoxygenated blood from the kidneys will return to the heart by going from the kidneys through the right and left renal veins to the inferior vena cava into the right atrium of the heart. So that's a nice simple one. While I'm thinking about it, So let's look at how we get to the brain. All right. So let's look at one of the pathways that we get blood to the brain. So here we have the ascending aorta, aortic arch, brachiocephalic trunk. Brachiocephalic trunk is going to split off into two directions. One will be the right subclavian. We're going to ignore that one for now. And we're going to follow the right common carotid artery. The right common carotid artery is going to move up superiorly, and it's going to branch out into the internal and external carotid arteries. That is actually going to join with it's going to join with the circle of Willis, okay, which is right here. So this is half. This is half. So this is a semicircle of Willis. All right, that was a bad joke. All right, so this is half of the circle of Willis, and this here. So right here is the internal carotid artery, and that's where that joins with it. Oxygenated blood from the heart is going to go through the ascending aorta, okay, through the aortic arch, through the left subclavian artery. Now the left subclavian, we can't see where it branches here, but there is a branch rather far out actually, if you look at the diagrams. And there is a branch that comes off superiorly from the subclavian artery, and that is the vertebral artery. So the vertebral artery actually branches from here, and then it's going to arch in, and it's actually going to go towards the spine. So it's going to go towards the spine, and it's going to end up going through the vertebral foramen, okay, in the cervical portions of the spine. Now, so this is going to continue to travel superiorly. It actually is going to travel through the base of the skull at the foramen magnum, and the vertebral arteries are going to join together to form the basilar artery at the base of the brain, or the brain stem. Okay. So the vertebral veins are going to join together to form this basilar artery right here. Did I say that correctly? Good. Okay. So this is the basilar artery. So it goes from here to about here. So it's basically that brain stem from here to here. Okay. The basilar artery is going to feed into the circle of Willis. Okay, blood draining from the head is going to drain through the internal and external jugular veins, as well as the vertebral veins. Okay. The internal jugular veins and the vertebral veins are going to drain into the brachiocephalic veins. The external jugular veins are going to drain into the subclavian veins just before they turn into the brachiocephalic veins. They're right there on the border. Okay. So the brachiocephalic veins, of course, from both sides are going to both drain into the superior vena cava, which goes into the right atrium of the heart. So you will need to know some of the structures of the liver for the circulatory system. So this ugly thing is the liver. Right. So this is the inferior vena cava of the liver. And I actually think the best way to orient yourselves on this is to actually look underneath this first. Because if you look underneath, you'll see this green thing here, which looks like chewing gum. That's actually the gallbladder. And this red thing here is the hepatic artery. And this structure here that's kind of purplish or pinkish, that is the portal vein. Okay, so the portal vein is oriented more towards the bottom of the liver. And that way you can kind of see like where it's going through and also what shade it is. So this is the portal vein. All right, so now as I go ahead and look at the top, then I can see, okay, here's where the portal vein is coming out. So this is portal vein here. And I can see how it's spreading out. So all of this kind of at the bottom here. It's a little bit darker color than the other stuff. So all of that would be portal vein. Okay. Now, lying a little bit more superiorly, we have kind of this lighter shade of purple here. These are hepatic veins. Okay, so these are hepatic veins. All right. And the hepatic veins attach directly to the inferior vena cava, which is here, which of course goes to the heart. All right, so pathway to and from is really direct. So, I mean, the veins obviously is just going to go from deoxygenated blood from the liver is just going to simply go from the hepatic veins to the inferior vena cava and then straight to the heart. And they actually did not give you the pathway, the arterial pathway directly to the liver, so you're not responsible for that one. But you will need to know that structure. It is on your to-do list, but yeah. It's easy though, because it's the only red thing. Now, the one last thing for this. This is the superior mesenteric artery, and this is the inferior mesenteric artery. And then this is the superior mesenteric vein and the inferior mesenteric vein here. So on the back, this is the inferior mesenteric vein, and this is the superior mesenteric vein. So pathways, so let's look at pathways to and from the mesentery. Right. So pathway to the mesentery is going to be oxygenated blood from the heart will travel through the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, the thoracic aorta, through the diaphragm, right, into the abdominal aorta, through the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries, into, finally, the mesenteric. from the mesentery to get back to the heart. We will go through the superior and inferior mesenteric veins, superior, inferior mesenteric veins, to, remember this actually sits kind of on top, so it goes through this structure. So from there, it goes through next the portal vein. Okay. So it goes through the portal vein, then through, oops, sorry, it zoomed out on me in a weird way. Okay, so let's try that again. So through the the portal vein, okay. So through the portal veins or portal system, through the hepatic veins, then through the inferior vena cava, okay, this thing, and then back to the heart. Okay, so that's the only trick on that, not too bad.